Now, I want to talk about investments a little bit because you have a really interesting way of, sharing with people, with your followers, and I love that. Whether certain stocks or investment vehicles are halal or haram. And of course, I know you're sharing your opinion simply, and that's really all you can do. But I want to ask you, what do you usually look for when you are evaluating if a specific stock or investment vehicle is halal or haram? Are there certain things that you're kind of looking for to evaluate these things?
Yeah, so broadly speaking, you want to make sure the business itself that you're investing in is not fundamentally doing something that is against our Islamic values. Mm-hmm. So common things are a business that makes all of its revenue from interest, such as banks, anything to do with alcohol, casinos, firearms. There's kind of a difference of opinion about that, but generally speaking, it's not something that we encourage, especially because a lot of the companies that manufacture weapons are often actually used against Muslims. So it's kind of, I don't want to say political, but it's kind of the reality of it. Mm-hmm. Even though weapons are also a tool, they can be used in both good and bad, right? So there's a conceptual thing there. But generally speaking, you want to avoid companies that fundamentally do something that is against your values as a Muslim. So really, that's what it first comes down to. Now, secondly, there are standards that scholars have established. So alhamdulillah, over the decades, scholars have kind of come together and said, okay, we need to develop some standards if we're going to agree that investing in stocks or investing in global markets is going to be acceptable. Here are the standards. And my opinion on this is that it's still something that is developing, but there are standards, and we can kind of we can adopt them, and we can at least use that as a starting point to evaluate whether or not we're comfortable with an investment. So for me, the first thing is the fundamentals, or the actual what the company does. The standards that were established by scholars, the most well-recognized standard is the abbreviation is AOFI, the Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions. I don't think I got that fully right, but I never do. But essentially, that organization, it's a global auditing organization with Muslim scholars, well-renowned Muslim scholars on the boards, and they've come up with standards. So the first one is that no more than 5% of a company's revenues should come from impermissible sources. So, for example, you can have, let's say, what's a random company? I don't know, General Motors. Let's say General Motors, they make cars, right? That's fine. But let's say they have a division that, randomly manufactures alcohol too. And if that becomes more than 5% of their revenue, then the stock itself becomes non-Shariah compliant. Now, for me, it's important to differentiate between Sharia compliant, non-Sharia compliant, and then halal and haram, right? It's important that we look at companies not as black and white, and more as, it's a more on a scale. But generally speaking, you avoid these kind of companies. So 5%, not more than 5% of revenues in impermissible spaces. So generally speaking, it wouldn't be permissible, according to these standards, to invest in a company that has more than 5%. And then you look at the financial ratios of a company. So you look at their debt and their cash. Usually debt and cash is interest-based, especially in the West. So the scholars say is not more than 33% or 30%, depending on which specific standard you follow. But let's say 30% to make it simple, of a company's total value or market cap can be in debt or in cash. The main reason for this is just to reduce the exposure. Reduce the exposure to riba, essentially, to interest as a percentage of your investment. So if we were to say that no company, companies can't have any interest-bearing debt or any interest-bearing cash, then the universe, the investable universe, would be like 2 stocks maybe. You know, like there wouldn't be enough stocks to choose from. So this was, I think, a way that the scholars used to kind of narrow down the to make it a feasible investable universe for Muslims to invest in. So it's a practical way to approach the stock market. So that, I know that was a bit of a technical breakdown, but I think it's important to know where we're at right now as a community in terms of what standards we use for Sharia compliance and non-Sharia compliance. But at the end of the day, what I sincerely believe is, I get a lot of questions asking me, okay, is this stock halal? Is this stock haram? You know, can I do this? What if it says it's halal on this app and haram on this app? What do I do? So it's really about knowing the standards, in my opinion, and then coming to a decision as to what you're actually comfortable with as a Muslim investing in. And then we just another point that I want to mention is that even though a company can have up to 5% impermissible revenue, that impermissible revenue also needs to be purified. So there are ways to do that, and I talk a little bit about that on my page. It gets a little bit more technical, but essentially you donate a certain portion of your gains or a certain portion of returns that were given to you. That corresponds to how much impermissible income there was, and you donate that to charity. So
interesting. Yeah, it's a really interesting approach, actually. Thank you for sharing that. And I actually learned a lot just from you sharing that. So not too technical, brother. This is exactly what I wanted, mashallah.
Assalamu alaikum. You've just watched a clip from our Ummahpreneur Live Podcast, where I interview high-level Muslim entrepreneurs at the top of their game to break down business, mindset, lifestyle, and entrepreneurship from an Islamic perspective. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more and make sure to check out the full interview that's linked in the description below this video. I'll see you there. Assalamu alaikum.